Hello and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore and our favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my stupendous co-host with me today, Matt Rossi. How you doing today, Matt?
I am here, or perhaps I am out in the galaxy, forever searching for new and interesting experiences.
All right, well, Matt's become a cosmic being, and I don't know how to take that.
Well, at least I didn't say take the word of one who knows. Man, I hated Starhawk growing up. Ah, Starhawk! Also, before you get rolling, I gotta say, I went back into Starfield and went to a bunch of planets that, again, you remember you were saying they seemed empty? Stuff pops up as you explore the planet, like a lot of it. I'm just putting it out there.
Appreciate that. But that's not we're not here to talk about Starfield, though. We are here instead to answer questions from our wonderful listeners. So if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com, and that's singular podcast. Specify in the subject line which show it's for, and if you have a special pronunciation for your name, please include that as well. If you want to hit us up on our Discord channels, we have one set aside for Patreon supporters as a way of saying thank you. It's our Patron Queue and Podcast Questions channel. Again, same thing, specify what show it's for, and if you have a special pronunciation for your name, let us know. And then if you can't support us on Patreon and still want to hit us up on Discord, we do have our Q and Podcast Questions channel, which we encourage you to put questions in there for. Without further ado, we're going to get right into the questions here. And our first one comes from Marie, a good friend of the show, been around for a long time. Thank you very much, Marie. What is so special about the sapling world tree that the dragonflights need to defend it? Not how special it is to night elves. I get the sense that it's more than that. In Talison's latest cinematic deep dive, he says that the aspects say that the tree is where they are the weakest. Why is that? Matt, you are the resident expert of all things elven here. Do you have an idea?
No, I have absolutely no idea why they said. Anyway, that's been the show, guys. How you know? I mean, seriously, I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, let's speculate. Why would they consider it the weakest point?
Hold on. I do have some ideas. One of it is that it's quite possible that since they don't have their full aspect power back, that maintaining it inside the Emerald Dream is a great draw on their power. For one thing, they had to bring Azshara back from the dead for this, and she isn't what she was. I mean, she's tied to the Shadowlands now. So her daughter attempting to do it, and her daughter is doing it in, there's nothing that one of them does that they don't all do. So the other thing is that we know that the Emerald Dream has long been a certain place that people keep loving to attack from. And I'm going to point out, stuff we've seen makes me think that Fyrakk is pretty far gone along the way to thinking the old gods are great and singing the national, old god anthem.
Well, not Fyrakk. Fyrakk doesn't really know about them yet.
I think he does.
That's a Ridicron. Ridicron's one that made the deal.
No, dude. It doesn't matter about the deal. We know that Fyrakk is wandering around with a big axe named Firatath, which is basically like, it's like old god last name. We also know that he's covered in shadow flame. He absorbed the shadow flame into himself. And we have no idea what that's doing to his head. But it's got the word shadow right in it. And when Neltharion / Deathwing used shadow flame, and when his children used shadow flame, who were they working for?
Yep, no, that's fair.
Yeah. And since we know that the Emerald Dream was attacked recently, as in it's one of the things that got Azshara killed in the first place, by N'Zoth, the old god that we kind of accidentally gave a book to the future in the beginning of this expansion, I think it's quite possible Fyrakk is totally working for the old gods and just doesn't know it. Like, he's a useful idiot. Point him at something. Maybe he'll get lucky and you get to destroy this thing and wreak all kinds of havoc. But what was it before? How many lanterns light their way?
5, I think.
And we've already seen one world tree get blown up and burned down. One of them is dead up in Northrend. Its corpse is literally digging into.
Technically, there's a new seedling growing in the middle of it, but
yeah,
yes.
And if it's attached to the root system, then that could also mean that that's being influenced by Yogg-Saron. There's the one that never got to be finished, the one that Fandral was attempting to make that became one of the trees, the emerald trees. And there's we also know that Il'gynoth appeared in a place where there was no world tree, but he took the form of a world tree. Where was that place? It was inside the Emerald Dream. So I don't know exactly why the dragon said that. I don't know if it's because they're being drained of their power or because they don't have as much power in the dream because it's not Azeroth. I don't know.
So, I mean, it could be a number of things as well, too. One of the most, I guess, I don't want to say obvious, but one of the most on-the-nose things is this isn't a world tree constructed from a seed in the same way as the other world trees. This is unique, at least from what we know, in the fact that the seed was born of a combination of the magic of Elune and the Shadowlands. So you have all these souls that have been essentially given a nascent life or are being cradled inside of the seed that were sort of blessed with that power. The power of Elune, the tier of Elune, was the formed base of this particular world tree seed that contained everything therein. And I think that is unique. While the other trees seem to be constructs of Azeroth that were blessed or infused with some form of power, whether it be Titanic or otherwise, to grant them immortality to the Night Elves, or to do any number of other things, basically make it what we would consider a world tree. We knew that they were placed on caps of big great power and everything else. So this is different in that regard because it is born of both the Emerald Dream, the power of a celestial goddess, essentially, or an entity that we don't fully understand, because let's be honest, we don't fully understand Elune, and then Shadowlands on top of it. Like, it's all these souls and everything all in one fell swoop. It is vastly different than all of the other ones. The other interesting thing is, while it is in the Emerald Dream right now, it is probably the first example of how sort of a item born in the Emerald Dream can transition to the physical world, where it's located or where it is where we're going to be going in the Emerald Dream. There's no landmass there. There's nothing there and on Azeroth proper. Everything that we're going to be experiencing, all the landmasses, everything we're going to be going through, the roots of where the new world tree are, everything are only in the Emerald Dream. But if that can transition from the Emerald Dream to the material plane, then what does that mean for things? And I was going to talk about this with Il'gynoth. Il'gynoth was in a construct that looked like a world tree. We don't know if Il'gynoth crafted that or if what is happening now was attempted before, where a new world tree was being constructed in the Emerald Dream to be safe and then became corrupted by Il'gynoth in the Nightmare. But that was only contained in the Dream and the Nightmare. What happens if Fyrakk or any of the Old God patrons that possibly are looking for Hyde N'Azoth see how the magic works, how they can transition something from the backup to reality? That becomes a really dangerous thing because we, like Matt pointed out, we've seen the Void is able to sort of jump into and attack other realms, right? The Void has a hard time taking physical form in the material plane in any sort of thing that doesn't mutate it, right? The Old Gods are bits of Void flung into our world that have been mutated or evolved to be different than what they were when they got here. What happens if they learn how to craft that themselves or to guide it or to figure out how that sort of transition works? I think that becomes a liability. Now, there could be something to what Matt said about the power being drained, or that it is a great strain. And there is probably some truth to that because, I mean, the Emerald Dream had been under assault for how long at this point? The Nightmare had been a growing thing since, Xavius really first started? Maybe even before that? I'm looking at Matt for confirmation.
Oh, sorry, you actually got me thinking about something completely different. I was thinking about exactly what Xavius did the first time when he grafted a branch to the new world tree. I always forget where he got the branch from. Like, I know he got it from the Old Gods, but I don't remember exactly where he got it from, like what it was that he grafted. But I started thinking about it in terms of what you said about Il'gynoth, and I was like, wait a minute. What if there was no such thing as they already tried to make a world tree and then the Old Gods corrupted it? What if it was the Old Gods and trying to make that world tree in the first place?
Yeah.
What if this is actually somebody else stealing an idea from the Old Gods? Like the whole deal with Il'gynoth, because we saw Il'gynoth again in Ny'alotha, And he was completely different. He wasn't like in a tree. He wasn't a tree at all.
And just to walk back real quick, so Xavius, when he died, his soul was contained inside of a tree, and the branch that before his transformation and everything.
Yeah, that's right. Because the tree actually got like into him during the explosion. Yeah, I remember.
And then a branch of that tree is what he grafted onto Teldrassil when it was still growing to essentially become the pathway in to make the Emerald Dream the nightmare. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, and keep in mind that when Xavius did that, that's because Teldrassil was uniquely broken. Fandral did not get the blessings of the Dragonflights. And as a result, the magic was growing without the blessing of the Dragonflights to control and shape it, which turned out to be a bad idea. I guess they basically got sick of Fandral constantly trying to make world trees.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, like, dude, does every problem solve with a world tree in your mind? No, stop it. But regardless, now I'm thinking about the thing with Il'gynoth and that tree form in the Emerald Dream, and it might have been that they were trying that trick already. And that reminds me of what we used to say back about N'Zoth and the Halls of Origination and that whole deal. That we don't really know what happened to N'Zoth. We don't know if N'Zoth is dead or not. My money's on not. So
my money's
that's
also on not.
That's interesting to me because now you've got why are the dragons at their weakest there? It might have absolutely nothing to do with them, them being weaker at all. It might be that their power doesn't work there because it's not their home ground. It's not where they got their power. It's not a realm of order, and that's where they get their power from. They're powered by the order magic that was used in their creation. But the nightmare, we don't know where this is all coming from in terms of Fyrakk's invasion. We don't know exactly where he's leading it from, but we know that it's basically the Firelands. He's actually brought the Firelands into the Emerald Dream. That's interesting because we haven't seen that before. We haven't seen any of the elemental planes do that kind of thing before.
But it makes a certain amount of sense, though.
It does make a certain amount of sense because I was thinking about this. We know that a lot of the planes that we have were created by Titans or Titan Forged.
Mm-hmm.
We know that at least four elemental planes that we know of around Azeroth were created by the Titan Forged to hold the elemental lords at the end of the war with the Black Empire. But we know that that's something that the actual Titans used to do too, because Sargeras made it such a prison inside the Twisting Nether because he had all these demons showing up and he couldn't contain them. Like he'd kill them and they'd come back. So he built a prison to hold them. And now I find myself thinking about that because we have the Twisting Nether and the demons and then the elementals and the elemental planes, which begs the question, before they made the elemental planes, the elementals would always come back from death. Where were they coming back from? We know that you can basically kill an elemental and they're not hurt. Like Ragnaros got killed and so it just went back to the elemental plane of fire.
And we were told that like a demon, if we tried to kill them in their home plane, that it would work forever. But I don't know about that.
Well, that's the thing. Is that their home plane?
Mm-hmm. Since they're really not from there.
Yeah. Think about this much too. Ragnaros, and I forget which of his lieutenants, but I think it was Geddon and Gar, killed Thunderon. They consumed his power, and yet when they had to put the rest of him in amulets, the talismans of Binding Shard, and when that was when that was collected and used, he was recreated. And Thunderon wasn't even an elemental lord. He was the quote-unquote son of an elemental lord. Now, certainly eligible to be an elemental lord, but not actually one. And yet, he couldn't truly be killed. They consumed him, but he wasn't dead. He came back. I think right now he actually is the Wind Lord, isn't he? Prince Thunderon is the Wind Lord?
I believe so.
Yeah. So all of this leads the question, if the old gods were attempting this trick before, if now they're possibly wanting to see what, the Night Elves and Dragons are going to do, would see if their version of it works better. If Fyrakk is somehow tied into that, like whether or not he knows it, through his alliance with the Elemental Lords, which is another thing, the Elemental Lords are still under the control of the old gods. Like if the old gods tell them to, they have to do things. At least as far as we know, we've not seen anything of the bindings having been broken. Although Neptulon certainly wasn't doing what Azshara wanted, and that was coming from N'Zoth.
Mm-hmm.
So back and forth on that one. But let's assume for now that there are elements within the elementals that are willing to do, at least for now, willing to play along with the old gods, if for no other reason than to give the middle finger to the Titans. Does that mean the elementals come from another plane? Like, or I mean, if they don't come from Azeroth, and we have elementals on other worlds, right?
We do, but I'm starting to.
Go ahead. You go.
There's something that I said a long time ago that always kind of sticks with me, especially when talking about the elementals in general. We have elementals everywhere. There are elementals comprised of whatever components make up the realm we're in. We saw elementals when we were in the Shadowlands. They just happen to be made out of anima or something native to whatever. Yeah, like animentals. That's a really good way to put it. Something native to the realm that they were in. So I'm wondering if Azeroth, and I've talked about Azeroth being sort of like this, the melting pot of the galaxy, right? It is almost unique, at least as far as we can tell, in the fact that it seems to be touched by all realms of existence. At the end of Shadowlands, we sort of had this glimmer where, we went to Zereth Mortis, and where did the sepulchre of the first ones touch? It touched back to Azeroth. Azeroth was able to link back through to us, and it was the Jailer's attempt to link back through to it. And Matt, and you brought this up beforehand, is that if one exists, there's probably others. There's probably ones from Realms of Order and all the other ones that exist there in the cosmology chart, which makes it unique, and that Azeroth might be the only place in all of existence where everything touches. And I've said this a couple times. And maybe that also makes the denizens there unique as well, like the elementals, because the elementals were there before Titans got there. They were there before we got there. They existed on Azeroth naturally. And maybe that's also why the wild gods can't die either. They're not wholly of one place. They can be consumed. Their energy can be manipulated or turned into something else. We saw that with my boy Ursoc. But what if that's why elementals can't die? Because they're built of everything.
Or what if it's not necessarily that they're built of everything, but the old codicil used to be you can't kill them except on their home plane. But we've then seen things been killed on their own plane and still come back. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or as near as makes no difference. And we saw that Sargeras was using a Titan to essentially let him bring the Legion back time and time again. And I saw online someone made the point he was bringing them back in a specific place. Before, when Sargeras would kill a demon, it would come back somewhere in the Twisting Nether.
Yeah, just there was no pinpoint, right?
He didn't know where, but now he could control exactly where they came back. So if they'd failed him in some way, then he could punish them. Hence Varamothras. What if the reason elementals don't seem to die permanently is because it's nothing to do with dying on your home plane. It's because they are linked. You're talking about how they touch every plane of existence. But what if they're not? It's not every plane of existence that's the issue. It's this plane of existence.
That they're tied to it by mechanically or whatever.
They are part of it. They are it. Mm-hmm. They are the cosmos taking smaller forms. Just like the Titans did with the Titan. They're literally the universe itself. They're made up of the things that make up physical existence. They're like avatars of physical existence in a real way. And the reason that they don't die is because when you kill one, did you kill all fire? Did fire die? No, fire's still here. Then I guess he isn't going anywhere either. Because this is their home reality. More so than any other spirit. Like, a demon is a creature of the Twisting Nether. It comes to our reality, but it's from the Nether. The Titans bound the elementals to elemental planes that are not their planes. That's not where they're from. That's not what they're of. Like, think about the Firelands, where everything is a mockery of a living world with living animals and living places. There's rivers of fire and lakes of fire and animals of fire and, rain of fire and fire and fire. Fire doesn't exist in a realm of all fire all the time. Like, how does fire even survive like that? It is literally their hell. The Titans built 4 hells and stuck the elementals in them. The elementals are supposed to, in a world where there's plenty of anima, the elementals all come together in a peaceful way. In a world where there isn't enough, they fight. But either way, they come together. They move towards and through each other. You can call it chaos, but in a way, it's just a different kind of order. And I think that's one of the things to think about. Fyrakk is leading the elemental forces of the Firelands through into the Emerald Dream to destroy an object that isn't even real yet. What happens if he pulls it off? If he infuses it with the Shadow Flame? What do we get? What will he be bringing to Azeroth? Like that's something that to me is very interesting about all this, because I think your point about the worlds all touching on Azeroth is a good one, because it means that Azeroth is made up of everything. The plane that Azeroth, not just the world itself, but the plane that Azeroth is in, is composed of everything. All these different quote unquote fundamental forces that have their own pocket realities, those pocket realities are all simultaneously, they're like predecessors of Azeroth, of this realm, but they're also like copies. They're like bad Xeroxes. Like it's like if you took the universe and like this time we're going to make a smaller version of it entirely out of death. What? Why would you do that? Well, no, we didn't do that. We already had the realm of death. We just need something to, we need something to add to this. When you look at it in terms of the first ones and what they were doing, they were making a reality. They were making the realm Azeroth is in. And in order to make it, they had to create blueprints and concept art and attempts. Like, oh, look at this one. Oh, no, that didn't work at all. Oh, yeah, that's not good. Definitely can't make it entirely out of death. What about if we make it entirely out of chaotic fell energy? No, not going to work. But so we should just get rid of the fell energy? No, we need that to corrupt that other guy. Okay, yeah, good. Like, it's a complicated thing. If we take the idea that the first ones were going for something, like they had a plan, then Azeroth is the place where everything meets. It's the meeting ground. It is, in a very real way, the true home for many entities that we see as other planar. And absolutely, it's the true home of the elementals. Because this is where the Titans found them, It's really been getting to me.
Yeah.
Like I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of why would the dragons say that? The dragons would say that because they are not as real there. And look at the fact that Ysera couldn't stay awake in it. Her service in the Emerald Dream was painful for her. She spent all her time having visions and sleeping. Everybody who deals with the Emerald Dream spends a lot of time dreaming.
Yeah, so I mean, look at the druids.
Yeah. It's quite possible that the reason that they're defending it so hard is because they don't want to have to go in there, because they know if they do, they kind of have to then sleep for 1,000 years. It might be inherently innervating to go to a place that is technically a realm of life, but it's a realm of life being born. Once life is born, it doesn't stay in the Emerald Dream. It goes out into the world. The Emerald Dream is like the backstage or the nursery. So yeah, I don't know. I got a lot of thoughts about this, but I really don't know the actual answer to why are the dragons saying that they're weaker there.
Yeah, but I think it's has to do with probably, again, just the nature of the tree itself, the nature of Azeroth, and what it could potentially mean. Because, I mean, we've seen that and I'll go back to N'Zoth here real quick, the biggest problem is that knowledge, right? Knowledge is absolutely power. And the more knowledge that we give to these entities that don't want to do anything with our best interest in heart, well, it could get a little complicated. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit, Marie. And if not, well, we'll try again later. All right. We're going to move on to our next one. I think this may have been touched on before, but could Azshara somehow be an aspect or avatar of the nascent soul of Azeroth herself? She was very close to the Well of Eternity for some time. Could she be infused with so much of Azeroth's arcane energy she was an extension of the planet? Or I guess maybe her mom could have been the one exposed. I just feel that her inherent mastery of the arcane is somewhat linked with the planet world soul. Maybe the other golden-eyed elves as well. And this is from Jaeger, who is a dwarf hunter on Lothar. We've talked about this a little bit in the past with the whole GoldenEye thing and what that actually means for prophecy and what it means in terms of Azeroth, etc., etc. When it comes to Azshara, there is possibly it is very easy to link her to sort of Azeroth itself. You're right in listing out the things that you do. The proximity to the Well of Eternity and having that font of arcane power. Being born with golden eyes is supposed to be a sign of great power or prophecy in the future, right?
It would be accurate to say it's a great promise. You have
a great promise. Yeah. And she is probably I would say she is the strongest arcane wielder on Azeroth alive right now. I think that even Khadgar would have a heck of a time trying to keep up with her. Jaina as well. Them two together, maybe. She's up there.
She was able to successfully keep Jaina from getting in and out pretty much at will.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason that Jaina managed to open a portal was she had to tie the area to the amulet, the Heart of Azeroth, which is exactly what Azshara wanted her to do anyway. So, yeah, it is fair to say that Azshara is powerful enough that demon lords of the Burning Crusade did not want to mess with her. Like, ones that didn't mind reaving whole cities were like, nah, I don't think I'm going to fight her. Like, I always forget if it's Manaroth, the Blood of Manaroth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It was Manaroth who was like, maybe, kill Jaden or Archimonde could take her, but I certainly don't think I want to try.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like, when we go back to this often, like, Sargeras was potentially a suitable mate for her. A Titan, a being of pure arcane energy was maybe good enough for her. Maybe. She's super, super powerful. But all that to say is that maybe she is tied to Azeroth in some way that we can't see. And maybe that's what made her desirable for the old gods to reach out to her in the first place. Why N'Zoth was the one that offered his assistance. You said it sounded like you were going to say something, Matt.
Yeah, I was just waiting for you to get your thought out. I was thinking about it in terms of, like, I don't think Azshara is an avatar of Azeroth. I don't think she's going around doing the will of Azeroth. But we also know that Azeroth was having a lot of bad dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said before that I felt like Azshara saw herself not as a child of Elune, but rather as a direct rival to Elune. Now, it's quite possible that all the negative stuff coming up out of Azeroth, due to, like, the old gods digging in, the fear, the panic, the not understanding what was happening to it, because it's not, even though it is an enormously powerful cosmic being, it is still a baby. Cue the "I'm just a baby" meme. But it's quite possible that Azshara picked up on it. Was literally, as she sat there with all her people, you'll notice that everybody, that for all the power of the well, for all that they drew so much from it, all the people who were her most treasured followers who were studying that thing snapped. The more they were studying it, the faster they went mad. And it wasn't the kind of madness where, like, they're like, yes, the old gods, yes, everything is true. It was the kind of madness where you start, like, I want to gain more power. If you are afraid, sometimes you hide, sometimes you lash out. So if that fear, the fear of a thing that is, as far beyond our understanding, it's harder to understand this thing than it would be to understand, like, Sargeras. If he was standing in front of you right now, you could get a handle on him faster than you could on this, because we all know that whatever Azeroth is, it isn't as simple as a Titan. It might very well be the end goal of all the first one's work was this one thing, this one world soul that would be far greater than any other ones. The world soul that was so powerful that just seeing it made the Titans want to do what they never tried to do before and save a world from the old gods, save a world from the void. They just couldn't allow it to go. For all we know, Azeroth itself is the first child with the golden eyes, and that the creation of every child with golden eyes afterwards is a result of the power reaching out through the through the Well of Eternity and finding people that could basically do what Azeroth couldn't, because Azeroth can't do anything right now.
Yeah, because, I mean, until Magni did his thing, and that was an ancient ritual, exhausting, required him to be deep inside of the earth beneath Ironforge, and resulted in him being taken out of the game for quite a long period of time.
Well, you'll note that what he did didn't specify what would happen.
No, it didn't. It just said you'd be able to talk to Azeroth.
Yeah, it didn't say anything about, you will become, you're going to be able to talk to the world and it's going to talk back and you're going to talk for it. None of the rules were in there. But it was just, I need to know what's going on, so here goes.
But what I mean is, like, that ritual existed for a reason, and maybe it is because, like Matt's pointing out, over the length of time that things have existed, that Azeroth has reached out to other individuals throughout history. And this is where you're mistaken with they're mistaken with the golden eyes, right? Like the golden eyes this is a great thing. You have great promise. Or maybe it is something where like you can hear what Azeroth has to say. Because,
or you've already heard it.
Because what is the color of Azerite?
Yeah, it's the kind of golden glob stuff.
It's a golden yellow, right?
A lot of the Titans, that's what their eyes are.
Yep. Titans have golden eyes as well. But like now you go to these and you go to Queen Azshara, you go to Illidan, and they have it. And then let's go to Malfurion. Malfurion didn't get his golden eyes right away. When did he get his golden eyes?
Right after he ripped Azeroth a new one.
Like explain it for the people. Yeah, but
go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. At the end of the War of the Ancients, it became clear that thanks to the Highborn meddling with the Well of Eternity, that it was going to create a portal. And the portal was going to be used by the old gods to get around the Titans' imprisonment. They were going to step out of the portal and be free. And in so doing, probably everything that they knew of was going to die and be thrown back into the Black Empire ages, and it was going to be bad. And Malfurion basically had to make a choice. And that choice was, I can stop it or I can let it happen. If I let it happen, everybody dies. If I stop it, everybody might die. And he chose the option that had a chance for survival. And he sabotaged the link up that they had created with between the Well of Eternity, which I keep trying to call Emerald Dream today because my brain is one shot. The Well of Eternity and the realms beyond, which is how the old gods were planning to get out. It was how Sargeras was planning to get in at the same time. So I don't know what would have happened if both had happened at once. Quite frankly, I don't want to see the old gods fighting Sargeras on Azeroth. Not a good move. So when he sabotaged it, it caused what is essentially often called an explosion, but was actually an implosion. Everything rushed into the portal as fast as it could. This caused many problems, one of which was much of the continent subducted. It literally went down as the force of the implosion just crushed everything. What happened to Azeroth was basically that the hole that the Titans had created with Aman'Thul ripped out Yashaj and had to create the Well of Eternity to basically stop the wound from killing the planet. That wound swallowed most of the continent of Kalimdor that existed at the time. The Great Sea basically rushed in, the water that surrounded Kalimdor rushed in and filled the void, and that's why you have a big ocean over the Well of Eternity now. That's why the Maelstrom exists, because the power that was coming up through the Well of Eternity is now coming up directly into the ocean, which is creating this elemental roiling chaos. Keep on this, because we're going to go somewhere with it. And in so doing, he basically, for the most indelicate way possible, and I'm sorry, but he tore Azeroth a new one, or at least a bigger one.
The wound increased exponentially.
Yeah.
Right? Like think of it. If Azeroth screamed in pain when the old god Y'Shaarj was plucked from that spot, creating that wound that the Titans had to devote countless facilities and workings to get it to stabilize, what happens when that explodes?
Yeah, and think about how Azeroth probably notices you when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's quite true that he was picking the best of all possible bad options there, but still, it is not surprising to me that he has gold eyes now, because the world almost certainly screamed at him at least once. He probably had no idea what he was hearing,
mm-hmm.
but at the end of the War of the Ancients books, he's insensate after what he does.
He's knocked on his bottom. Like he is out. Like it is almost like, the best way that I can put it is it was almost described as if he was psychically reeling. I think that's a fair statement, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, if a giant entity, because I mean, the Night Elves at this point don't really know about old gods. They are and Titans and stuff like that. They know about maybe some of the creations that existed, or maybe some entities of sufficient power. They know of Elune, and they know of demons, and they know of these very powerful things. But when something like Sargeras screams in your ear, like, or in your brain at this point, that's going to cause you to go like maybe a little haywire for a while. But yeah, I mean, the fact of screaming to stop, or even just picking up on like the psychic screams of pain that Azeroth, because we know that Azeroth does feel, right? Like we know that even in its nascent form, it feels pain. It as an entity has fears and can react. We know that it can have nightmares, and those nightmares can be made manifest. Yeah, I'd say that blowing up a part of its surface and causing that wound to reopen into what is essentially an ever-flowing, constant, festering wound would cause it to scream really, really loud. And him being the closest one there, no doubt in my mind he heard it, and that's what made his eyes go gold.
Yeah, he literally had Azeroth in his head.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're going to go back to something we were talking about earlier, because Joe put this out there, and now we're going to follow this thread that literally just came into my head while we were talking. The wound is now the maelstrom.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the Shaman Order Hall?
Right at the edge.
And what's it infested with?
I mean, there's lots of things that it could be infested with, but elementals is really the main thing.
Elementals and shaman. It's infested with shaman. But calling them shaman, saying shamans are an infestation just sounds to me. Well, I wasn't going to do it, but okay. But no, in seriousness though, there's elemental forces all over the place. When you get a big cut, you scab over. And then as the scab heals, if you rip the scab off, then you bleed more, and it's very painful, and you'll yell. And then it scabs over again. But each time it scabs, there are like filaments of collagen going across, trying to reach out to each other. Think about that when you think about the fact that the elementals at the Well of Eternity aren't fighting each other.
Nope.
For one thing, why would they have to? There's tons of anima there. For another thing, what if they're trying to knit the place together? What if elemental spirits, elemental beings, are essentially the immune system for the world, or the healing system? And the reason we exist, the reason that Titan Forged had to be created and then Titan Forged had to be changed, was because Azeroth needs T cells. It doesn't have an immune response to these things that have been happening to it. The old gods are not something Azeroth has a defense against. And that's why the Titans thought they had to come along and interfere. And in a way, they were right, because they had to provide the building blocks for an actual immune system response, which is the creation of T cells. It's like the bringing of mitochondria into the cell was a way to gain power. Titans of the mitochondria being brought into a new kind of cell, which is us, that will be able to act against the old gods, because it will contain, much in the way like, your immune system knows the genetic code of the things it's fighting. It knows what, it has when you get a vaccine, what you're getting is the genetic material of a virus telling your body, this right here, this is the bad thing. Okay, I got this inside me now, so now I know when I see this to go after it.
Yeah, very real possibility about that. But I guess, I know, looping it back in, I don't know that we have any other possible explanation for what Azshara really is, aside from probably somebody who, like Matt said, going back to it, is able to, it maybe at a subconscious level, hear Azeroth. But I don't think she's an avatar. She's definitely not doing the will of Azeroth. Everything she's doing is either selfish or in a bid for power, or some long game or con that we have no idea. But
I do think that there's an interesting idea here, in the idea that being the speaker of Azeroth isn't a one-time gig.
Yeah.
That there may have been others throughout history. There may have been other beings that the world touched.
And maybe they don't know.
No, maybe they had no idea. Just I hear voices and I do what they tell me.
Well, you know what it reminds me? You know what it reminds me a lot of? Velen in his relationship with the light. Right? Like, Velen is given prophetic visions. He's given them by the light. He doesn't always understand what they are. When he first got them, they overwhelmed him, right? And they sort of helped him sort of see possibilities in the future, threads of things to come. Not necessarily what would happen, but, sort of, here's an idea. Here's a rough idea of what's to come. How many prophets have there been in Azeroth's history? Probably countless. From all the trolls and shaman and any of the other races of Azeroth that sort of have that sort of spiritual connection. How many of them have said to have a gift of prophecy? How many books are sitting in the Karazhan library right now that were written or collected from prophets throughout the ages? Maybe they were listening or hearing bits of Azeroth that they didn't even realize that they were doing. They weren't picking up on it. They weren't maybe in control enough to understand that that's what they were doing. And maybe people like Azshara, people like Illidan, people like Malfurion don't realize that's what they're doing either. Magni,
well, think of it this way. Magni once said that Azeroth reminded him of a child, of a baby.
Yep.
What happens if a baby is upset about something?
Usually cries.
They scream.
Yep.
They won't stop until you make them feel not upset because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know that their parents are sitting around going, what is it? What do you want? We gave you a bottle. We burped you. We changed you. Please, God, what? Now imagine that's happening in your head and it's in the form of nightmare imagery and it won't stop. It's not exactly surprising that even the most non-affiliated with the old gods prophets seem to be a little weird. There's a certain amount of, if Azshara grew up on the one hand being completely worshipped by everybody around her all the time, while on the other hand hearing constant nightmares about the world being destroyed, it's not surprising that she grew up to think, I have to make the world perfect as I am. I am perfect. So the world has to be perfect. So I stop having to hear this. So I stop this feeling of continuous dread. I will not allow that to control me. I will not allow it to overwhelm me. You saw what she was like when an old god showed up in her face. She didn't, possibly because she'd spent so much of her life developing iron discipline to deal with this continuous shrieking in her head from a god baby that had no idea what was going on.
And maybe that's why she's such a great arcane practitioner, right? We've talked about this in the past where the idea of order is essentially imposing a will on something and putting it into line. And that's what arcane magic does. I think we had a question last week or maybe the week before where the question came up of why don't shaman have water elementals, yet arcane wizards basically do. Why do mages have it? And the answer essentially is because they can essentially impose their will on it and make it happen. You brought up the point that they're almost akin to Dark Shaman in that regard, where they're just essentially enslaving or forcing it by imposing their will on it. Azshara is essentially doing that with the force of magic in general.
And what artifact did Azshara have?
Teldrassil.
And who uses that now?
Shaman. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but I think that's like, I think you're right on that. I think that there is something there, and I think maybe that is the real truth. Maybe we've just solved the GoldenEye stuff for Azeroth and World of Warcraft, and maybe we're gonna get cursed in the lore rooms. But maybe that's it. Maybe it's just because they can hear what others can't, but they maybe don't realize it, or maybe Azshara does at this point and doesn't care. Because she's got her power, she knows what she needs to do, and honestly, the best thing for her ever is if the Titan never wakes up, because we don't know what happens after that. But hopefully that answers your question. We're going to move on to our next and possibly last one here, based on our time, and it's another one about the world trees. And some of this it's a multi-part question. Some of these are going to be a little bit quicker than the others, but this is from Aeroline, who's a blood elf hunter on Khazmodan. Are there only two world trees, Nordrassil and Teldrassil? I know that Teldrassil was destroyed, but I'm going to refer to it as a present tense. It will always live on in our heart. But no, there are several that we've known about. There was, God, why can't I think of all of their names at this point, Matt?
Because it's all a bunch of Drazzles.
There's been, 5 total-ish? Because you have the one that's in Val'sharah, you have the Teldrassil, you have the one in the Northrend area that has been knocked over, which I think is Nordrassil, right?
I believe so, yeah. Crown of the North.
Yeah, and then you have the new one that just popped up.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Hold on. He cut 6 branches to grow great trees, but then there was one to create Andrassil. Andrassil was the one in the north that got felled.
That's right, yes.
And they renamed it Vor, not Nor. Vordrassil, because Nordrassil was the one, the original one.
Yeah, because it was Nordrassil, Teldrassil, Andrassil / Vordrassil, Shaladrassil, the unnamed tree, which was the 5th unnamed tree that we don't know of, which might have been the whatchamacallit one, Il'gynoth tree, which I think is the Il'gynoth tree, but we don't know what that is or where that is. That is somehow linked with Ungoro Crater.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Amadrassil, which is the current one.
Yeah, but Andrassil was the one that became Vordrassil. Shaladdrassil is the one in Val'Shara, which is about as old. It's quite possibly like a sibling tree to Nordrassil.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It seems likely that based on the power of the green dragonflight in that area, that it's the remnants of a pact made between the then night elves of the city over. I can't remember the name of the gigantic elf city. Oh my god!
Oh, the
Nightborn live there now.
Yeah, but Shadowshill also has a weird history that we've never really talked about it, and maybe we should at some point, because after the War of the Ancients, the surviving satyrs that were rounded up, there was a vote on what to do with them, and it was either that they were to be executed or imprisoned or whatever the case was, and they were imprisoned in eternal sleep beneath the roots of Shaladdrassil.
Yeah, and they put other things under there too.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of that was their go-to for a while, was knock them out and put them under a tree, which might go back to that thing we were talking about earlier about why the Emerald Dream is not the greatest place to be, hanging out.
Yeah, maybe. But there are at least 6 of them. 5 that we know of and 1 yet unknown, potentially, which may pop up later. This may be relevant later. But this is the 6th, and I'm air quoting here, tree with those 6 great branches. Can you explain the significance of the world trees and their role in Azeroth? I've heard about their origins, but I can't recall hearing about why they were created, other than to be home for night elves, but I feel there must be some deeper purpose in that.
The Nordrassil... Oh, you go ahead, Joe.
No, go ahead, please.
Nordrassil was created in order to honor the pact between the night elves and the dragon aspects, basically because the dragon aspects were like, okay, you've lost a lot here to helping to defend the world from the thing that you guys helped cause. So we're going to make it a deal with you, Malfurion, your brother, by creating this new Well of Eternity, has essentially just started the whole process over again. So we're gonna stick a tree over it, and we're gonna bind you to the tree, and you will live as long as the tree is here for the purpose of keeping the Legion from finding out about this Well of Eternity.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that we know that Shaladdrassil is supposedly older than the Sundering. Shaladdrassil would therefore be older than Nordrassil, because Nordrassil happened after the Sundering.
We're going to talk about Andrassil and Vordrassil in a minute, but
yeah, Shaladdrassil
might actually be the original entry point into the Emerald Dream.
Yeah, and one of the reasons is that the World Tree Nordrassil was created by taking an acorn from Gahanir, which is the mother tree. The mother tree. Gahanir is like an elemental plane of a tree. It's an almost metaphysical tree. It's a domain where one of the wild gods lives, and it's in the Emerald Dream itself. It's the tallest tree in the Emerald Dream. With the creation of a new world tree within the Emerald Dream itself, that's interesting. Gahanir died, supposedly.
I have a couple thoughts. So, we're gonna get into that in a minute, but I mean. Yeah,
but to get back to it, that's Nordrassil's origin. It was created as part of a pact between the dragons and the night elves that we're going to keep this magic thing under control, and we're not going to do that again. We definitely don't want to have to fight the Legion again. That would be terrible, guys. Yeah,
and then Andrassil Vordrassil was a world tree created in the Grizzly Hills, which was basically used to sort of stop the spread of Serenite in Northrend.
Yeah,
at least that was the original intention of it.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time to really go into it, but Fandral Staghelm, who was, I guess, Malfurion's best student after his previous best student turned into a werewolf. I'm not kidding. Fandral kind of had an aggressive, punchy attitude towards how to druid. And since, Malfurion was taking a lot of extremely long, centuries-long naps, a lot of the time Fandral was the chief druid. Like, he was the most powerful druid around. Like, there wasn't anybody more senior than him, so he could pretty much do what he wanted. For some reason, whenever they had a problem, Fandral was like, oh, you got a problem? Yo, I'll solve it. Check out this world tree. And it would be there. He would throw a world tree at the problem with mixed results. Like, in addition to the Andrassil world tree that he tried to create, which literally was a graft. He was trying to graft a world tree onto another place. It's if you ever see how apples are made and how apple orchards make sure that their apple trees grow the right apples, they use a graft from a previous tree.
Ooh, you know what I remembered? Like, Gahanir isn't dead.
It was listed as dead before. I don't know.
Yeah, so back in because during Cataclysm there was a whole storyline with Aviana after she was resurrected, and that it seemed like, and then as I think it's Warlords of Draenor, where the tree seems to be restored, because isn't Aviana the one that invites the Aarakocra and offers them a place on the mother tree? So like that would indicate that potentially Gahanir is back.
Yeah, and then that makes another question. That would make the world tree that's growing there now essentially a kind of spiritual grandchild to the mother.
Mm-hmm. But I think there's a reason for it too. So this is the thing that I was thinking about when we were talking about this, and we were talking about the roots. And I don't know why I haven't thought about this before, but I think there might have been another purpose with the world trees, and maybe one that even like the dragon aspects didn't even realize. And maybe the great mother tree did or did not realize it was doing when it was essentially gifting its ability to be planted on the material plane from the Emerald Dream. When we talked about the Black Empire, we talked about all essentially the old gods burrowing and tunneling through Azeroth, creating a network that sort of reached almost like roots across the face of the planet and butted up against each other, where they essentially clash and created borders. And we always talk about them going deep, trying to penetrate down into Azeroth itself, making its way to sort of like the nougaty center of the world. What if the world trees had an additional thing where their intention was sort of what the Night Elves, what Fandral was doing with it, using them to sort of like cap off places of like big exposure? But what if their whole point was their roots were supposed to go deep and go wide and connect with each other to sort of create a shield against the penetration of the old gods, which is why the old gods seem to be so absolutely obsessed with world trees, because they are absolutely obsessed with world trees, maybe more than the Legion are. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about that possibility that they were attempting to create a bulwark or a barrier, maybe even like a bastion of forgotten antiquity. I'm not letting that go. But another thing that comes to mind when you're talking about that is that the reason Fandral went to them time and time again was that he basically thought of them as a purification thing.
Yeah.
And that might have been the goal in the first place.
Yeah, because I mean, again, we don't see the roots of the Black. We don't see the roots of the Black Empire anymore. They're all sort of well contained.
Well, for that matter, what are real roots from a real tree? One of the things they do is bring up stuff from the ground and use it to feed the tree.
Yeah, and they go for miles.
If you've got plants in your yard, how the roots, like Joe was just saying, root systems go for miles. Like and the other thing too is that root systems don't just mean roots. Root systems have a webbing of fungi that surrounds them and interacts with them.
Yeah, I think in the real world, the largest one I think is like something like, I don't know, 106 acres of like a combination of like a mycelium network and a root system network of trees. I think it's called Pando, right? It is massive. And like it's all one organism. It is.
Yeah, Pando is Latin for I speak, which I should have known that.
I thought I spread.
It's what's called a clonal. Yes, I spread. It's a clonal organism representing an individual male quaking aspen that has basically grown out into all these different trees that are all it. They're all part of it.
They're all clones, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. It's 100 acres. It's not the biggest living thing in the world,
but it's massive.
But it is only beaten by another fungal entity. This is a tree entity that has the fungus on its webs. There's another entity that is literally there's a mushroom over there, and 25 miles away, there's a mushroom over there. And those two mushrooms actually are the same mushroom underground.
And we got a glimmer of something like that too in the, when we were in Shadowlands too, didn't we? What those networks can be. We literally talked to, not even just go to the why can't I think of the Natureland?
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
There literally is a fungal network that you travel between, that you essentially fix the blockages and you talk to it. It's alive. Well, as alive as anything the Shadowlands can be, but everything is interconnected. So I always wondered if that was something to do with the world trees, where maybe there's a reason that they were put where they were.
Ardenweald,
thank you. But I remember Anne talking about this a long time ago. It was one of the first tinfoil hat pieces, I think, on the website, was the idea of there being 5 old gods, but then there being the correlation of them to world trees. And we even talked about this early on in this podcast's life, where what if there is that correlation? What if there is as many world trees as there are old gods, and there's a reason for that?
5 lanterns to light our way. Why would you need 5 lanterns to light your way if you had 5 things stopping you?
And we have 5 known world trees, with the only unknown one being the one that existed in the Emerald Nightmare that may have been a blueprint for an attempt to use those trees to get rid of all of them. Because when Vordrassil, now the Shattered Crown of the North, when it fell and died, yes, there is a new tree growing in it, but it's growing in a pool of Serenite. Like, literally everything that lives there has been driven insane by the whisperings of Yogg-Saron. That tree is gone. We talked about this before of why would Teldrassil be the target of being burned like that? Is there something that maybe needed to be done, that it needed to be removed and taken out of the way? And we talked about this before. If the trees were being used to hide Azeroth and hide the Well of Eternity from the Legion, from Sargeras, those trees might have more of a protective barrier thing going on than just that.
Well, and plus, if you think about it too, it might not even be that the trees have to be destroyed, because they're not.
No, they're not. They come back, but maybe they have to be taken out for a certain period of time.
Maybe that's the whole point, is to sacrifice them one after the other to create, for what we call a cascade failure. You burn down, you arrange the whole thing with the Legion showing up. They take out Nordrassil, so then Teldrassil is created to try and replace it, and in the process, it's used as a means to infect the Night Elves with the Emerald Nightmare. And then it's burned down, creating, a situation where there's no active world tree. Right now, there is no active world tree on Azeroth.
Hold on. Even better. Okay, so wait a minute. Let's go back to Ganir, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ganir died when Aviana was killed in the War of the Ancients. Look at before that. In the War of the Ancients, look at all the corruption that came after that. Your cascade failure may be right on point.
And they built Nordrassil after Gahanir's death,
which wasn't linked with the mainframe. If you think about it in a term of like computers, Gahanir is the mainframe.
That's what happened to Teldrassil.
That's what happened to Teldrassil.
Teldrassil, the reason that it's not called a world tree at first is because it was a literal connection to Gahanir.
Mm-hmm.
There was a root between them. Gahanir died, it took Teldrassil out. But they used the acorn of Gahanir to create Nordrassil. Okay, now they've got this new thing. Now how do we get rid of that? But
because they're and all the corruption that happened in between, the old gods were able to break some of their prison bonds. You have
the War of the Emerald, the Satyrs.
The War of the Satyrs. Yep.
Yeah.
Why they're so fixated on the trees? They need to keep their opportunities. They've every single time a tree goes down, especially while Gahanir was not online, it was an opportunity for them to press further and further, to extend their influence, to break their bonds ever so much more and do what they needed to do. Because it wasn't just the Titan facilities that were keeping them in check, and maybe the Titans didn't even know this. Maybe the Titans had no bloody idea.
Well, look at what happened to Mother when they were experimenting.
Yeah, what happened to Mother?
She sat inside of a decaying Titan facility while all the old god experiments she was running basically conglomerated into an old god-like thing. And she didn't seem to understand that it was even happening. They don't seem to really perceive the old gods very well.
No, it's almost like they're a blind spot for them.
Like they know they're there, but it's not like they're invisible, but they just don't get it. Like no matter how many times they see it.
Which then leads it towards something more akin to nature to take care of it, something more that blueprint that Azeroth itself needs to defend itself against. Because if any of the Titans understand the old gods better than any of them, including Sargeras, it's going to be Azeroth, even as a child.
She's been had the things on her this whole time.
Yep, they've been in her nightmares. Her consciousness has mingled with theirs at least a couple of points. She has all the memories and the connection through Magni, and as we just established, potentially through all these prophets throughout history. So Gahanir, who is a pocket dimension or mother tree within the Emerald Dream or just outside of the Emerald Dream, much in the same way that the elemental prisons are, maybe a blueprint for defense, a blueprint on how to purge and purify, like you said, because that's what they've used it to do. They've used it to purify in the same way that the Titan facilities try to and have mostly failed to. Let's be honest.
Well, the Titans are really bad at purifying things because their entire idea is burn it with the light.
And then make it do what we want it to do. Whereas,
this thing's corrupted, burn it all and start again.
Whereas the Night Elves and the Druids and the Wild Gods and the Dragon aspects, even, because they're tied to Azeroth in a way that the Titans and the Titan Forged can never be, they still have that elemental nature about them. We've established this. That's
the thing, too. We've seen before, going all the way back to the original Uldaman, when the Discs of Norganon, that the Titans created their Titan Forged out of the actual elemental materials of the world.
Yep.
And think about what the Titans actually are. They're gigantic planet entities encasing a spark of power. The elementals fight over anima. The Titans are gigantic elementals. They're planet elementals. They're made of planet. No wonder they don't like the elementals, because the elementals as we have them are wrong order.
Yep.
They're not doing what the Titans would do. They're not being like the Titans are.
But that brings us back to it, because the Titans they don't understand purification. Reorigination. Reorigination is their idea of it. But nature does. Azeroth does. In this case, the Druids in the Emerald Dream does. And that's what these trees have been doing. Not only is it taking, the power of the Well of Eternity and giving the Night Elves eternal life at that point, but it's taking any corruption that would linger or any pain and sort of rechanneling it, right? And that's what all of these are trying to do. That's why Fandral maybe understood that the rest of them didn't. And maybe this is why Fandral went even further off the deep end and embraced the flame, because they wouldn't listen to him. Maybe he actually understood it better than Malfurion did. I'm not saying that everything he did was right, but maybe his deep understanding of that wasn't wrong. Maybe he was actually right in saying we need to put these trees in these positions. And maybe he didn't fully understand why, but he understood the idea of, we're going to stick it on this thing, stop the spread of Serenite, because the tree will filter it and purify it and take care of it. And what is Serenite? It's the blood of Yogg-Saron. It's literal corruption.
What color are Fandral Staghelm's eyes?
In the image that we see of this ghostly image of Fandral Staghelm, gold.
And the image is from the war against the Kiraji.
Yep.
Or the Gold Gods, which Fandral was the primary guy for. And what happened to him during that war?
Lost his son and went absolutely mad with anger and anguish.
Which is a pretty familiar thing to people who end up fighting the Old Gods. They always end up kind of getting destroyed, even if they win.
Especially in an area that has been ravaged over eons. Yeah, so this all circles back to what we talked about earlier. Man, I love these episodes. There may be something there that he may instinctively understand or instinctually understand that he doesn't know why, but he's compelled to. He's compelled to plant those seeds.
Because the freaking planet keeps screaming in his head to do it.
Yep.
Because every time one of the trees goes down, she gets some relief.
And here's an interesting thing too, right? Going back to the Druids of the Flame, I can understand why he would easily embrace it as well, though, too. Because what is the one thing that Ash is almost universally great for?
Growing crops in.
And what
plants in.
What happens? You know this. What happens in a field that has been freshly ashed the next season?
Usually it may not be the next season, it may be years, but
you get a bumper crop.
You get a bumper crop, or you'll get really thick verdant growth. Forest fires are the fertilization of forests.
Yep.
They clear out the dead wood and the stuff that isn't alive anymore. Unfortunately, they do also kill a lot of living plants, but the seeds are often underneath the ashfall and they grow. Because it combines with the natural elements and everything of the soil. When the rain does eventually come, it does mix with it and makes sort of this. We talk about the deep loam of the earth, and we literally are just in Abyss, where the Niflheim talk about this. We're literally in a place named after the loam, but the deep verdant loam is what gives it life. So maybe, latching onto it and thinking, you know what? This is absolutely right. Burn everything down to the ground. I can plant more seeds. They're going to grow strong. They're going to grow fast. They're going to keep everything safe. I've done my job, but nobody will listen to me, so I'm going to burn it down myself.
right? Like I could see
also,
that.
And also, if you think about it from a certain perspective, fire is nature's way of purifying things.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't great to have everything be on fire all the time. But again, that's the whole point: is you need the elements working in coordination, maintaining a balance. So yeah, there's certainly. I don't think that Fandral was right about everything.
No.
I think he broke.
I think he did.
When his son died, he broke. But because he broke, he was more willing to accept what he was being told, what he was being prompted to do. He didn't even think they were voices from outside because he didn't hear a voice. And Magni says the same thing. He doesn't hear a voice.
It's like feelings, emotions, or things that are projected into him.
If you don't know that that's coming from outside of you, because the Night Elves don't have a tradition for this. The Night Elves just have it happening to them. If you don't know, then that's just you. If that's just you, like if you have intrusive thoughts and don't know they're intrusive thoughts, you'll just think you're thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's these are literally intrusive thoughts.
Sometimes a whisper is worse than anything shouted from a mountain. We could go on for so much more, but I think we're going to have to cut it there. There are a few more questions from Airline regarding the world trees. We have talked about some of these before. There are differences between the history of the trees.
Do you want to try lightning around it? Like you read it off and I'll give a quick answer. And we'll see
you know what? Let's go for it. Let's give the people what they want. What is the difference between Nordrassil and Teldrassil? With the Kalendor Cup I was doing the race around Teldrassil and I realized how much smaller and less significant it appears to be versus, I think in Nordrassil, than Teldrassil. And I don't know if there's a lore reason for it, if there's a stylistic choice in development.
Teldrassil was built to be a thing people sat on. It held up a city. It was literally just engineered to hold up a city. Whereas Nordrassil, while still enormous, keep in mind that, it's up on top of a mountain. It is not built to be as big as Teldrassil because it didn't need to be.
Yeah, the Night Elves and the living creatures sheltered in the roots and under the boughs of the trees, other than Teldrassil. Teldrassil was the first time that they built the city on top of it in the trees.
They literally lifted old Night Elf ruins. Those buildings that you see actually date back to the original Sundering. Those are old Night Elf buildings that they lifted up out of the water with the tree. So.
Okay. And I think that was it. That was the last question. I do apologize. Right. So Airline, thank you very much. Hopefully that spreads some light on it. Thank you very much for everybody who gave us topics today that gave us spun onto our wild tangents that we all seem to tie together. I love these episodes. These make me happy inside. But that's going to do it for us. Blizzard Watch is made possible due to the generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means this podcast sighting community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, better chance to having your question answered on our podcast with a queue, and an ad-free site experience. Again, if you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show in the subject line, and any special pronunciation for your names, include those in there. If you don't want to hit us up on email, you can go ahead to our Discord channels. We have one set aside for Patreon supporters as a way of saying thank you for keeping the lights on. It's our Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel. We tend to look there first, which is where most of these questions came from. And if you can't support us on Patreon, we understand that you can continue to support us by making sure you share our content on whatever social media sites you find yourself on. Share them with your friends, give them a listen, and those share links actually help quite a bit, especially on platforms like Spotify. It helps propel us through the algorithm and ensures that our content gets pushed up and on people's dashboards, and we appreciate that. But you can hit us up on our Q and Podcast Questions channel. And with that, folks, we'll see you next week.
Bye.